All right, well, welcome 12 Springs Church. We're so glad that you're joining us this Sunday. We're here with the Whipples, Kyla and Bobby, and we just are so excited that you decided to join with us this morning. A couple of announcements is, first of all, we're going to be starting our rhythm group soon, and that's actually what we're going to be talking about today, so I'm excited to share a little bit more about that with you. And then the other thing is that we just want to remind you that you have the opportunity to give online, even though we can't meet in this building. Right now, we want to let you know that you can give online through PayPal or through Venmo. So just go to our website, 12springschurch.com, and you can set up your online giving, your online tithing there. So like I said, I'm here with Kyla and Bobby Whipple. How you guys doing?
Good.
Good. Well, thanks for being with me today. I wanted to have you guys here because you've been crazy enough to say yes to leading one of our rhythm groups coming up. So first of all, I wanted to kind of give the church an opportunity to get to know you two a little bit. And so kind of tell us a little bit about how you got to 12 Springs, what it is that attracted you to this church, maybe a little bit about your story.
Yeah, we've both been kind of church people our lives. I mean, I grew up in church, so we kind of thought, we knew what church was like and, what we expected. And then I guess more recently, just with some social things going on in the world and just kind of
asking questions and
acknowledging some of our own, questions and doubts and things. We just we were looking for a community that was more open to, not everybody having to believe all the exact same things.
Or maybe even being okay asking questions, right?
Right. Yeah, being able to ask questions, and we really wanted a place that had more diversity, both like racially and economically, and we wanted a church that cared more about justice. Something, I think there are things that we wanted that maybe we didn't even know till we got here, but even that like small community and the idea of keeping the community small so that you really get to know each other and are in each other's lives. The mission mindset that the church has about what missions looks like, I think really resonates with us. So those are just a few, but and it was something we didn't think we would find. We really thought like we'll be in Tampa or like somewhere, an hour or two away. So it was such a gift really to come here and to find this place. So.
And you guys live in Venice, right? So it still is a little bit of a
hike. A little bit, yeah.
This is not Tampa.
No, a half an hour is not bad.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a similar experience. I didn't really know what I was looking for until I found it, and I didn't know. I was like, oh wow, this is what it's supposed to be like. At least for me, it was just so refreshing to finally find a place where I felt like I could ask questions and that I felt like I had a home.
Totally, yeah, sure, absolutely.
Awesome. So we're in the middle of this pandemic. We're still here.
Right.
Things haven't gotten better yet. But I wanted to ask you guys a couple questions. One is, well, it's kind of the same question, maybe highs and lows. Like what during this time has been really difficult for you and for your family? And then what are some of the maybe hidden blessings that you found during this time?
I think it's been hard. Like for our kids, it's been really hard. When school stopped, and had to be at home. And I think for our family, at least, we're going to keep them home for a little while when school starts again. And so that isolation. Financially things were a little funny at first, but it's been okay.
We've been pretty lucky.
Yeah. Highs.
I was just going to add one more thing. I think just not knowing, like, how concerned should I be about all of this stuff. I know there's a lot of different opinions, and
right. It's like, how do you find good information?
Right. So it's like,
and
am I being too cautious? Am I not being cautious enough?
It's really hard.
We're both introverts, so I think we are, some of the being home and being with family is good.
Social distancing is my thing.
Right. I wasn't hurting my feelings all the time.
Right.
Yeah, it's been a lot, we've had a lot more time at home together with our kids, and so that's been good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
So are there any other kind of like hidden things that you've seen where like you've seen God at work during this time?
of reevaluate priorities and places that we're connected, like what makes sense, where should we cut back, like are we overcommitted, and so I think that's been maybe a blessing in disguise a little bit.
Let's get hit reset and realigning your priorities a little bit. Yeah,
Right,
that's awesome. Well, so you guys have said yes to leading a rhythm group, and so for our church, our rhythm groups are going to be launching the week of August 16th, and this is really our attempt to help you all stay connected. So, what is it about, like, when we approached you about leading a rhythm group? What is it that like spoke to you, or why did you say yes to doing that?
Yeah, gosh. Well, when we started at 12 Springs, and really in our past church home, that's something that's always been really important to us. We've helped lead some groups over the years, and when we came here, which was about a year ago, that was one of the things we were looking forward to. So we were here like roughly 6 months, and then COVID happened, and so we didn't really get a chance to connect a lot in terms of small groups. So I think we're super excited to help facilitate that with some other people, and again, back to that idea of being a place where people can ask questions. We don't all have to have all the answers, where we can really have some close community, and really, I think, care and be with people where they are.
Yeah.
I think all those really.
Yeah, because we don't know where you are either. It's hard to really connect, and so even when the church is open, it can be difficult to know what's going on in everybody's life, and so we need those smaller communities, right?
Yeah, I think it's in some ways easy, to come to church, to see everybody, to be friendly with everybody, but then
High five.
there's got to be
Or some elbows.
Elbows, right? Yeah.
there's got to be that place where we really want that place where you can really get to know people on a deeper level, and so I think that's why we're excited about doing it.
Awesome. So if I was somebody who was like thinking, man, should I do this? Should I not? Kind of towing, maybe on the fence a little bit. What would you say to that person that's like thinking about joining a group but is a little maybe scared about doing it or nervous? Or
Right. Yeah.
I would say, chances are it's not going to be it's not an intimidating group. It's a group of people just getting together to, develop friendships and to get to know each other on a deeper level. You don't have to have, some background of like biblical knowledge and, or feel like you have, some special story to share. It's like,
Or have it all together.
Yeah.
Because we're in that same boat.
right. None of us really have it all together.
No.
Some of us are better putting a mask on, right?
Totally.
That's awesome. So as leaders of these groups, what are you hoping to like really get out of this, for you? Like it is a sacrifice, right? You are saying yes to taking some time away from maybe your normal family routines and stuff. So like for you, like what are some things that you're hoping, or maybe some growth that you're hoping to happen in there?
Yeah, I think this is totally selfish on our part because we just want a lot more friends. And,
Right.
Yeah.
No,
For sure.
like Kyla said before, since we started coming to 12 Springs, it was always our intention to get involved in a group just so that we could get to know the people in the church on a deeper level. And so,
Relationships.
Okay, that's good. So they need friends. Help find the Whipples some friends and be part of their group, or be part of one of the groups. We're going to be giving the group leaders some suggested names of people we think would connect well in their group, and they will be contacting you. If you don't get contacted or you don't hear from somebody and you want to join a group, just reach out to Ryan or myself. Is there anything else that I'm missing that you guys want to say?
No, we're just super excited. Looking forward to it.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. Ryan is going to be continuing our series in just a moment through the book of James. I don't know about you guys, but I've been super blessed getting to really go deep into this book and really look at what James had to say. And it's just amazing how relevant it has been for our lives right now. So thanks for joining us for church, and we hope to see you guys again soon.
All right, so I'm here with Cypress. She might chirp in a little bit. Say hi, Cypress. And we're in Lincoln National Forest in New Mexico. And I'm gonna sing today, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus, ukulele version, the Casita Special, Hope you enjoy. Ready, Bug?
So I want to ask you a question this morning. Do you help or hurt with your actions? The things you say, the things you post, the emails you send, the things you do. We live in a time where one quick, thoughtless post can bring down a whole career. We live in a time where one quick, thoughtless post can insult hundreds of people at one time. We're living in a time of protest over racial inequality and police brutality. We live in a time where we can't meet together because of a dangerous virus that's striking our country and our state. We live in a time of political turmoil that's also unprecedented in our lifetimes. This is a time of fear and uncertainty unlike anything most of us have ever seen. And today's message from the book of James is as relevant to our situation as it ever has been. We need this teaching from James today perhaps more than any other time in our lifetimes. Because today James is going to teach us about wisdom. And with one quick outline of the world we live in that I just gave you, couldn't you use a little more wisdom? I know I could. So James is going to make a case that there are two kinds of wisdom, each originating from a different source. And I'll give you a hint, the sources are not Republican or Democrat. And what he's going to teach us has the potential to change not only your life, but the lives of those around you. So let's blow off the dust of this 2,000-year-old teaching and dig in. So James, like his older brother Jesus, was ready to do battle with the best that Judaism had to offer. And that was the Pharisees and the Sadducees. We have to remember the context, that this book was written in the 40s to the 60s AD. And a very significant event happened in 70 AD in Jewish history. That was when the Romans seized Jerusalem and destroyed the temple. And in those violent battles and conflicts, over 20,000 Jews were killed. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, and a group of people called the Zealots used their tremendous influence in Jerusalem to stir up the people toward rebellion. This was happening during James's writing of this letter. So watch carefully how he subtly dismantles the desires that lead people to war against the ridiculously more powerful Romans. In verse 13, he says this, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in humility that comes from wisdom." Now again, context is so important, but we need to add another layer right here. Remember, this was the very, very early church, sometime after the stoning of Stephen in Acts chapter 7. And James doesn't mention any Gentile believers, and he even addresses this letter to the Jews scattered throughout the nations. So James had a one-track mind in writing this letter. He was talking to people who were Jewish. And in doing so, when he asks this question, who is wise and understanding among you? He knows that the answer in the mind of every one of his Jewish followers in his flock would be the Pharisees. So they were still looking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees for wisdom. They were the learned ones. They were the educated ones. They were the ones everybody looked up to. They were the ones who had Torah memorized and could pull verses from Torah out of thin air and put you in your place and tell you where you needed to be and what you needed to be doing because they knew. And they had an authority about them that everyone still respected, even the followers of Jesus at this time. And if you go back a little further in the chapter, you can remember this whole chapter 3 started with James saying, hey, not many of you ought to be teachers because they're going to be judged more harshly. And that itself, that line, was a subtle shot at the Pharisees because they were the teachers of the law. They were the ones that everyone looked to. So James says, who is wise and understanding among you? It'd be similar to if you had a room full of, say, 3 CEOs of big companies, 3 PhDs, and 3 construction laborers. And you ask somebody to tell you who was wise in that room based solely on that information, on their occupation. Many people would say the CEOs because of their business savvy, right? And many people would say, no, the PhDs because of their education. But very few would say the construction laborers in that scenario. And that's because we often equate wisdom with earthly success or wisdom with education. But James is going to take this in a different direction and give them a whole new understanding for how to perceive wisdom. And the answer might not surprise you if you've been tracking with James with us for the last few weeks, because he's going to say if you want to see who is wise, you need to look at their actions. Look at what they do. So verse 13, he says, who is wise and understanding among you? And then he says, let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. So in other words, wisdom is not defined by how smart you are. Wisdom is not defined by which college gave you your diploma. It is defined not by how much money you make either. It's defined by what you do. And not only by what you do, but it's defined by how you do it. So particularly, do you do what you do with humility? This should sound familiar to us because James spent a lot of ink already talking about the relationship between faith and deeds, or faith and action. That faith is not solely defined just by believing the right things, but faith rather is defined by what you do. And wisdom really is no different. You can't be wise and arrogant at the same time, for example. And he's going to teach on that in a minute, so I want you to hold that in your brain. But first, I want to talk for a second about humility. This word for humility in the Greek in those days, to the average person in the first century, would not have been a term of flattery. You didn't want to be called humble. In the Greek, it actually means kind of like bland or mild, kind of meh, we might say today. But it was radically redefined by the New Testament authors, particularly by Jesus. In fact, throughout the New Testament, only 2 people are called humble, Jesus and Moses. So the bar for what this word means and who we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to live and act is set pretty high. Moses freed an entire people, and Jesus freed the world. So being humble is a good thing, and James is kind of leaning into that. And he's going to take the next few verses to kind of flesh out his definition of wisdom. And in doing that, he's going to subtly erode the power and the prowess of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, those for whom humility was not something they were striving for, right? And part of the reason they were looking for wisdom is that they were following a typical definition of wisdom, just like we see today, the kind that picks the wise based on money or education. They would certainly have picked the CEOs or the PhDs in that scenario that I gave you. So verse 14, you can see it. He says, "But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice." Okay, so back to our conversation about context. The Pharisees were the ones rallying the people toward a violent rebellion against the Romans that was not only against the tenets of Christianity because it was based and centered around violence, but it was also unwise because it was absolutely doomed to fail. Anyone in history at that time could see that. And the Pharisees, though, it was like they were blind to all of that because they were so full of what? Selfish ambition and bitter envy. Ambition to kick the Romans out of Jerusalem for a different reason than we may think. Okay, the common people didn't like the Romans because the centurions were in the streets and they could, prod you around with their spears. They could do anything they wanted to you. And the common people hated them, basically. The Pharisees hated them too, but for very different reasons. The Pharisees hated them because they represented a chink in their chain of power. The Romans had ultimate authority. The Pharisees were the one in the Sanhedrin. They created laws. They determined if you were in worship or not. They had a grip on the economic system of Jerusalem. They had a grip on the legal system. They had a grip on the worship and the faith and the religious system. They wanted to preserve their power. They wanted this battle with the Romans, this war, to be able to continue to leverage their own power. Not because of some injustice, although that's what they leveraged to get the common people to fight for them in this rebellion. So you can start to see the ugliness that was under this rebellion and why James is talking so much about this wisdom that comes from heaven versus the wisdom that comes from the earth, right? So he kind of throws down, he says, such wisdom is not from God. It's earthly, it's unspiritual, and then he really drops the hammer and he says it's demonic, right? And this is why these verses are hard to interpret, because you read this on the surface and you're like, geez, James, like just this calling them my wisdom, like earthly wisdom, demonic's a little rough, like a little intense, right? Just because someone's ambitious, does that really mean they're demonic? Okay, but this isn't just random arrogance or a claiming of wisdom by someone who's clearly not wise. It goes much further if you dig just beneath the surface. Okay, he's making an argument against the Pharisees who are inciting rebellion, a rebellion that James knows is doomed to fail. What James didn't know was that this rebellion was going to cost the lives of 20,000 Jews. It was an unwise revolt. And then to hammer it home a bit more, he says, when you have ambition and bitter envy, like the Pharisees and Zealots, there you find disorder, as this rebellion would prove to be, very disorderly, and every evil practice. In short, the rebellion they want to lead is contrary to the cause of the gospel because it is based in selfish ambition and evil motives and violence. And then in verse 17, I love this about James. He always does this. There's a big, big but, right? Verse 17, he says, but the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, gentle, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. So if you want to see wisdom from heaven, James is saying, look how the person acts. Look at what they do. Look at how they live their lives. Look at the things that they say. James says heavenly wisdom like this is first and foremost pure. The wisdom of the Pharisees was not pure. It was tainted by selfish ambition, by power, by arrogance, right? James says wisdom from heaven, though, is purified from all that. And then this list that follows is a list of what wisdom that is pure does. So you have the adjective of being pure, and then you have all these verbs and these verbal based words. It says, so what does wisdom do? It loves peace. It is considerate. It acts with gentleness. It shows mercy. It bears good fruit in the world. It's impartial. It's sincere. All these verbs about what wisdom does and what people who have wisdom do in their lives. It makes peace. It doesn't lead to violence or bloodshed, right? So this week, Elizabeth and I watched the movie Selma for the first time. I know that movie's a few years old, so we're a little behind the curve here, but we're excited to watch it. In the movie, there's this great scene where Martin Luther King Jr. is talking with his wife, Coretta, and he's talking about why he's kind of making his case for nonviolence rather than retaliating in kind. Coretta has recently had a conversation with Malcolm X, which has brought this up. And there's this great conversation. He talks about what shame is brought on the police. And when they're seen on TV by millions of viewers beating down defenseless, nonviolent protesters. In his mind, beyond just that television coverage that went to serve their cause, right? Because they were defenseless and being hurt by someone who was using violence to push them back. In his mind, fighting back with violence wasn't just wrong and unwise, because violence, but using violence against violence would bring more violence and lead to chaos rather than the change that they so desperately were fighting for. And using these tactics of nonviolence based in a Christian perspective, this wise understanding of the world, they were able to get many unjust laws changed, as you know. But while we're on the subject of violence, I want to spend just a second and kind of unpack it, because it's easy to let ourselves off the hook here. It's easy to say, well, I never hit anybody, so I don't have to worry about the violence thing, right? Well, I'm glad you never hit anybody, but violence goes deeper than even the physical. All you have to do is open up your Facebook app, and you can see people perpetrating violence against each other through their words and what they're saying and what they're posting. People are using social media to spread lies about others, to tear others down, to attack. And this isn't violence against the body of another person, but this is violence against the soul of another person. And the things we say and the way we treat others really do matter, and they really do show where our source of wisdom comes from. And by the way, James says there's only two sources. It's heaven or it's hell, essentially. It's from God or it's demonic. It's good or it's evil. So if we're spreading these lies or using our social media to hurt people and tear them down, attacking their souls, that is not the kind of wisdom that comes from heaven. There's only one other option for that type of wisdom. So remember, what you write on social media matters. It hurts people. You can hurt many people, actually, hundreds of people in a moment. There's this unprecedented time of communication that we're living in, and many are using it to propagate violence against others without ever throwing a punch. So if you want wisdom in this regard, here's a little opportunity for you to exercise godly wisdom. Reread that post and ask yourself a few questions that James gives us. Is it, first of all, pure? Is this post pure? Is it peace-loving? Is it considerate? Is it gentle? Is it full of mercy? Is it impartial? Is it sincere? And if it gets through that grid, go ahead and hit post. It's going to be awesome. If it doesn't, it may not be a wise action to hit post at that point. And I'm telling you, if followers of Jesus everywhere could just take this little grid from James and put their posts through it, we could have a Facebook revolution, a social media revolution on our hands, because that would be followers of Jesus acting with wisdom. So what does your wisdom lead you to do in this world? That's the bottom line question of this portion of James here. If you're only chasing after selfish things, that's not wisdom from heaven. If your wisdom or your reasoning leads you to become too focused on wealth, that's not wisdom from heaven either. If your wisdom or your reasoning or understanding leads you to sit in judgment against those who are less educated than you, that's not wisdom from heaven either. If your wisdom leads you to promote, support, or engage in violence against another human being, that's not wisdom from heaven either. But if your wisdom leads you to act in love, that's heavenly. If your wisdom, your reasoning leads you to lift up other people and support them, that's divine. There's something of Jesus in that. if your wisdom leads to bringing about peace and justice in the world, that is heavenly wisdom. One way to think about this as we kind of bring this to a close is to think about our wisdom and ask the kind of question, does your wisdom, does your reasoning for your actions lead to helping people or hurting people? One of the most basic definitions of power that I've ever found is that power is the ability to help or hurt. And your wisdom gives you power. What you say and what you do gives you power. And when you live out your wisdom, the way you reason and understand the world, and you live it out, are you helping people with that, or are you hurting people with that? And that's kind of the bottom line for us, is do we help or do we hurt? And what do I want for myself, for my wife, for my boys, for you at 12 Springs? I want us to gain a heavenly wisdom, a wisdom that is pure, that'll lead us to love others, that'll lead us to build other people up, to serve and to help, and all these wonderful things that heavenly wisdom does. The only true source of that kind of wisdom in the world is Jesus. And what I love about Jesus, one of the many things, is that he offers that kind of wisdom, that kind of heavenly wisdom to you and to I freely. There are no barriers here to get to Jesus. He offers it freely. Just like he offers forgiveness and grace and love and acceptance and all the things that he can give, he also offers wisdom to you. And so if you're flailing around in this life and you feel kind of directionless and you're caught up in this social media craze or the kind of bitter politics or partisan politics of our day, or you're feeling kind of lonely and depressed because of COVID and being isolated from people, whatever situation you are in, I want you to know that there's a Jesus who offers you love and hope and peace and grace and wisdom to walk through this world well. Okay, and to live out a heavenly wisdom, and he gives that to you freely. So it's my hope that you would receive that today. So I want to invite you just to pray with me right now as we close. Father, would you give us heavenly wisdom? Would you open up our eyes and our hearts to what it is you would have us to do in this world, how it is you'd have us to walk through our days, what it is you would have us to speak to others around us. Even what it is you would have us to post on social media. God, we want to give all of that to you, because giving all of that to you is wise, because it will lead to heavenly wisdom, to acts of love and peace and mercy in this world. So to all of you who are watching, may you stand up and walk away from this broadcast knowing that you are loved by a God who offers you heavenly wisdom, who gives you the ability through his Holy Spirit, when we become followers of him, through his Holy Spirit, to walk in wisdom and in love and in peacemaking in this world, to do justice and love mercy and walk humbly. That is the outpouring of a life centered on the wisdom that comes from Jesus. So may you go and walk in that wisdom. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. Love you guys.